The commute you didn't know you needed. The alarm goes off, you make coffee, you open your laptop, and just like that, you're at work. No commute, no transition, no moment where one version of your day ends and another begins. And for the first few weeks, maybe even the first few months, that feels like one of the greatest upgrades your life has ever had. Then something starts to happen that's harder to name. The days begin to blur together. Morning doesn't feel clearly different from afternoon. Work doesn't feel clearly different from not work. The mental separation that used to exist between your professional self and your personal self starts to dissolve. And it turns out, that commute you were so glad to lose, it was doing something your brain quietly needed. Psychologists call it a transition ritual, a defined period of time between one psychological state and another. The commute, however annoying, was a buffer zone, a decompression chamber, a signal to your brain that a shift was happening. Without it, the brain has no clear cue for when to switch modes, and a brain that can't clearly switch modes ends up partially in both modes all the time, not fully at work, not fully at rest, hovering somewhere between the two, which is paradoxically more exhausting than being fully in either. The collapse of social bandwidth. In an office, social connection happens passively. You don't have to schedule it. You don't have to initiate it. It just occurs, in hallways, at coffee machines, in the 30 seconds before a meeting starts when people are still settling in. These interactions are small, often forgettable, but they are doing something important. They are keeping your social brain fed. When you work from home, all of that disappears. Social connection stops being passive and becomes entirely intentional. Every interaction requires initiation. Every conversation has to be scheduled, opened, and deliberately created. And the psychological cost of that shift is significantly higher than most people expect. Research on social connection shows that unplanned, low-stakes social contact, what sociologists call weak-tie interactions, plays a surprisingly powerful role in mental well-being. Not just close relationships, the small, unremarkable exchanges with people you barely know. Remote workers lose almost all of that. And because each individual interaction that disappears seems so minor, they often don't connect the loss to how they're feeling. They just notice that something feels off, that the days feel emptier than they should, that by Thursday they feel a kind of depletion they can't quite explain. The brain is running a social deficit it hasn't been able to name. The productivity illusion, here's one that catches almost everyone working from home by surprise. You work more hours. You have data to prove it. Studies consistently show that remote workers log more hours than their office counterparts, and yet many of them feel less productive, less accomplished, less satisfied with what they got done. How is that possible? It comes down to the difference between activity and output, and the role that environment plays in creating focus. In an office, the environment itself cues productivity. The physical space signals, this is where work happens. The presence of others creates what psychologists call co-regulation. Your nervous system unconsciously synchronizes with the focused state of people around you. At home, those cues are gone. The environment is associated with rest, comfort, personal life. And the brain, which is enormously context-dependent, struggles to enter deep focus states in a space it has always associated with something else. So remote workers often end up doing many hours of shallow, fragmented work rather than fewer hours of deep, effective work. They are busy all day, and they end the day feeling strangely unaccomplished. Not because they didn't work hard enough, because their brain never quite got into the state where the work that matters most actually happens. The surveillance anxiety spiral, something that nobody talks about enough in the working from home conversation. When you can't be seen, you become afraid of being perceived as someone who isn't working, even if you are working, even if you are working more than ever. This creates a particular kind of anxiety that researchers have started calling visibility anxiety, the fear that because your effort is invisible to others, it will be undervalued, overlooked, or assumed to be absent. It shows up in subtle ways: feeling compelled to respond to every message immediately, even late at night, to prove you're present, sending updates nobody asked for, staying online longer than necessary just to maintain the appearance of availability. And, ironically, all of that behavior, driven by anxiety about being seen as unproductive, actually makes you less productive, because the mental energy spent managing perception is energy that isn't going into actual work. This anxiety is not irrational. Research on remote work confirms that remote employees are genuinely more likely to be overlooked for promotions and opportunities than their in-office counterparts, even when their output is equal or better. The brain has correctly identified a real threat. It just hasn't found a healthy way to respond to it yet. The body pays the price. In an office, your body moves more than you realize. You walk to the building. You walk between rooms. You stand in the kitchen while the kettle boils. You take the stairs because someone is already waiting for the elevator. None of these feel like exercise. They don't register as intentional movement, but they are consistently activating your body across the day in ways that matter more than people realize. When you work from home, that incidental movement collapses almost entirely. Studies have found that remote workers move significantly less throughout the day than office workers. And not just in terms of steps. The micro movements, the postural shifts, the brief physical interruptions to sitting, all of it reduces dramatically, and the brain is deeply connected to the body's movement. Physical activity regulates mood, maintains cognitive sharpness, and manages stress hormones. When the body stops moving, the brain starts to feel it. Focus becomes harder to sustain. Mood becomes harder to regulate. That mid-afternoon fog that remote workers often report, that heavy, slow feeling that makes the last few hours of the day feel like wading through water, is partly biological. The brain is running low on the neurological fuel that movement provides, and no amount of extra coffee is going to replace it. The identity erosion, this one builds slowly. So slowly that most people don't notice it happening until it's already happened. For many people, work is a significant part of how they understand who they are. Not just what they do, but their role, their place in a structure, the way other people see them and respond to them professionally. In an office, that identity is constantly reinforced. Your name on a door or a desk, the way people greet you, the meetings where your input is sought, the simple daily experience of being a visible, recognized presence in a professional community. Working from home quietly strips most of that away. You become a name on a screen, a rectangle in a video call, a message in a thread. And research on professional identity shows that when the social reinforcement of identity disappears, people start to feel uncertain about who they are in a professional sense. Their confidence in their own value decreases. Their sense of purpose becomes harder to access. This is why so many people who work from home describe feeling, after months or years, like they've lost something they can't quite identify. What they've lost isn't productivity or connection or routine, though those matter too. What they've lost is the daily lived experience of mattering to something larger than themselves. The unexpected gift. And yet, for all of this, something else happens too. Something that office life, for all its social richness and environmental structure, rarely offers. Silence. Space. The chance to hear yourself think without the constant noise of other people's needs and energies filling the room. Research on autonomy. The psychological need to feel in control of your own choices and environment consistently shows that autonomy is one of the strongest predictors of well-being and intrinsic motivation. Working from home, when navigated well, offers autonomy in a way that few other working arrangements can match. People discover how they actually work best, not how the office told them to work. Not how the open plan layout forced them to work, but how their own brain, in its own time and space, reaches its most effective state. They discover they're a morning person who hits peak focus at 6 a.m., or a night brain who does their best thinking after 9 p.m. They discover they work better in 30-minute bursts than 90-minute marathons. They discover themselves, and that discovery, uncomfortable and disorienting as the path to it can be, is one of the most valuable things a person can find, a way of working that finally fits the brain they actually have.